Maternity leave is complicated. This video will make it simple. Stick around because I'm going to explain all the basic laws that pregnant employees in California need to know. Generally, yes, employers must let women take maternity leave. But the law's not that simple, so let's take a look. First up on our list is the Family Medical Leave Act, or FMLA. FMLA is a federal law that lets women take 12 weeks of maternity leave in any 12-month span. And you don't have to take all of that leave at one time. You can take it intermittently. And what that means is you can take the leave as you need. You can take a week here, a week there, depending on your needs. Now, FMLA isn't just for the ladies. Men, if you have a child and you want to take a couple weeks after the baby is born to bond with that child, under FMLA, you are allowed to. Very important thing to know about FMLA is when you take maternity leave, it is unpaid. But in California, we have this cool thing called paid family leave. So stick around, you're going to want to learn a little bit more about that. So what exactly does FMLA let you take leave for? What does maternity leave mean? Well, you can take leave for prenatal care. Obviously, you can take leave for the childbirth, bonding with that child after the baby is born. And very importantly, you can take a leave of absence for pregnancy disability, but we're going to talk a lot more about pregnancy disability leave in a minute. Finally, you can take a leave of absence under FMLA to care for a foster child that is placed in your home, or if you adopt a child, you can take a leave of absence. Now, what's really important to know is that FMLA doesn't apply to all employers in the United States. It only applies to employers that have 50 or more employees within a 75-mile radius of your place of work. So if you work at an office within 75 miles, if they've got 50 or more employees, FMLA applies to that employer. They have to let you take your leave of absence, and they have to hold your job open for when you come back. Also, equally important is you have to have worked for that company for at least 12 months. And during that 12 months, you must have put in at least 1,250 hours, which is a little bit more than basic part-time. Finally, there's another law out there that a lot of people hear about, which is the California Family Rights Act, CFRA. That is the California state equivalent to FMLA, largely mirrors that statute. The only deviations that are there aren't that important for a basic video. Pregnancy Disability Leave, or PDL. This is all about when a woman has become disabled as a result of the pregnancy. This wonderful California law lets women take a leave of absence up to 4 months long to deal with any disabilities stemming from the pregnancy. And the great thing about this law is, unlike FMLA, which requires 50 employees, this law applies to all employers in California that have 5 or more employees. So if you were denied a maternity leave under FMLA, you still might be able to get a leave of absence under the pregnancy disability leave law because you apply. But what's necessary is that you're disabled. Let's talk about that in a minute. Just like FMLA, you can take this leave of absence intermittently. Just like FMLA, it's unpaid. But again, we're going to talk about paid maternity leave in a minute. Your employer can ask you for proof. Well, what in the heck does proof mean? Generally, it's a doctor's note, right? But your doctor doesn't need to tell the employer what your disability is. Your doctor just needs to certify that you're unable to perform the essential functions of the job. So what exactly is a disability under this law? Well, if you're unable to perform the essential functions of the job due to a disability stemming from your pregnancy, that can be a disability. Or if your doctor certifies that working as you're working or doing those job duties or in that environment would pose an undue risk to the successful completion of your pregnancy, you might be considered disabled. Here's some examples, practical examples that people can latch onto. Let's say you have severe morning sickness, or your doctor, due to a complication, orders bed rest for 2 months, or you have preeclampsia or severe postpartum depression. All of those could be considered a disability under this law. Now, what's really important to know that if you have a disability, but you could perform the essential functions of your job if your employer would change your job just a little bit. That's called a reasonable accommodation. Pregnancy disability leave lets you ask for reasonable accommodations to let you continue working. And if your employer denies that, they break the law. What do I mean by this? Let's say you ask for modified duties or modified hours to deal with your disability, or you ask for a temporary transfer out of an unsafe work environment. That could be a reasonable accommodation. Let's say you ask for a longer break or a chair to rest on during your breaks. Now, so long as any of those requests are reasonable under a reasonable person standard, under what a jury would think, if the employer refuses to give you that accommodation, they break the law. That actually is pregnancy discrimination, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Because California is the greatest state in the union, we have paid family leave. Generally, every single person who receives a paycheck pays into state disability insurance. It gets deducted from their paycheck. It's generally on your pay stub. And the state of California, actually it's the EDD, will pay women 55% of their wages for 6 weeks while on maternity leave. As of 2017, the upper limit as to what the EDD will pay people per week is $1,173. This is a wonderful law, and it lets women sometimes take a longer maternity leave so that they can spend more time bonding with their child. Every pregnant woman in the state of California needs to know about pregnancy discrimination. The California Fair Employment and Housing Act, or FEHA, can be found in the Governmental Code, section 12940, subsection A, says that it is an unlawful employment practice for any employer to discriminate or terminate or in any way treat poorly a woman because of her pregnancy. It actually says because of her sex, but sex is later defined as including pregnancy, childbirth, breastfeeding, and related medical conditions. Now, what's also cool is that this reasonable accommodation provision under PDL is under the same statutory scheme. So if you request a reasonable accommodation and it's denied, law is broken, pregnancy discrimination. If you request a reasonable accommodation and they fire you for making that request, law is broken, pregnancy discrimination has happened. So what happens if you are fired because of your pregnancy? Well, you're going to want to call a lawyer and file a lawsuit. Well, what would you get? A lot of people want to know, how much is my case worth? Well, every case is different, but the types of remedies that you can get can probably give you an idea. First and foremost, you can get your economic damages. These are your lost wages. So say you were making $85,000 a year, you get fired because of your pregnancy. Well, you're not making $85,000 a year anymore. That's a very tangible economic loss that the jury can measure. Emotional distress. Now, these are often the largest component of damages in these pregnancy cases. They are very real, and especially in severe cases, they can be absolutely enormous. Punitive damages, everybody's heard about punitive damages. These are the damages meant to punish the employer for the unlawful behavior. They're very difficult to prove because you have to show that the termination was done with malice, oppression, or fraud. Not easy. And finally, in pregnancy discrimination cases, you can also recover your attorney fees. This is a wonderful thing because, one, this can be larger than the other three combined, but two, this often pushes cases into early settlement because defendants don't want to incur too much in attorney fee liability. If you need more information about any of the subjects I've discussed here, make sure you look below the video. There's plenty more.